Hello and welcome to this semi-annual for primary election years, this voter forum. My name is Rachel Crocker. I'm the director of the Albany County Public Library. And the library is pleased to once again partner with the League of Women Voters to bring you one of these voter forums. Tonight's voter forum will feature candidates from House District 13 and House District 45. We are so excited to be a part of this partnership. We think it's a critical role in the community to provide these information and opportunity for candidates to get to speak to our community members here in our county. And I'm going to hand it over to Nancy Lockwood, who will explain a little bit more about how the forum will work this evening.
Yeah, I'm Nancy Lockwood. Or do you have me on there? Okay. I'm Nancy Lockwood. I'm co-president with Lynn Ipina of the Laramie League of Women Voters, and I'm also the chair of our Voter Service Committee. And I would like to welcome everybody to our virtual candidate forum. I'd like to thank the Albany County Public Library and especially Rachel, who has been a great assistance to us with using the Zoom platform for tonight's forum. As she mentioned, our forum tonight is for the Wyoming House District candidates in District 13 and District 45. There are 2 candidates for House District 13, both Democrats, and 3 candidates for House District 45, 2 Democrats and 1 Republican. All were invited to participate in tonight's forum. However, our Republican candidate for House District 45 informed me that she was not able to participate in tonight's forum. The forum is being recorded and will be posted on YouTube in a few days. Information about finding the link to tonight's forum will be provided at the end of the forum. Before we get started with questions for tonight's candidates, I'd like to provide you with some general information about the primary election and about the forum procedures. The primary election will be Tuesday, August 18. Absentee voting is already underway. You may vote now by completing a ballot at the county clerk's office, or you can request an absentee ballot from the county clerk's office through August 17. Completed absentee ballots need to be received by the county clerk's office by August 17. Completed absentee ballots can also be taken to your polling place on election day, or you can bring them in and complete them there as well, but they can be turned in at the polling place. On the day of the election, polling places are open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Election information can be obtained from the county clerk's website or from the Wyoming Secretary of State's website. If you are not registered to vote or need to change your voter registration information, you may do so at the county clerk's office through August 3. You will need a picture ID to register. You may also register or change your registration after August 3 through August 17 at the clerk's office if you also cast an absentee ballot at that time. And you may register or change your registration at your polling place on election day. If you have special needs, voting accommodations and aids are available at each polling place and at the clerk's office. The election judges can assist you, and you can contact the clerk's office to make arrangements in advance for assistance. This year, due to COVID-19, the polling places have been consolidated. There are 4 polling places within the city limits and 2 polling places outside the city limits. If you are a registered voter in Albany County, you should have received a postcard in the mail with the location of your polling place for the primary election. You can also contact the county clerk's office or go to their website to find your polling place. The League of Women Voters Guide will be published in the Laramie Boomerang in the August 2, 2020 edition. The Voters Guide is already posted on the League's website, and there are copies available at the Albany County Public Library and the Albany County Clerk's office, as well as some other locations in town. If you are interested in knowing more about the League of Women Voters or in becoming a member, please visit our website and Facebook page. In addition to the Voters Guide, our website will have a link for the recording of this forum and those to follow a few days after the forums. We will begin tonight's forum with questions for the candidates. The League has chosen questions from those provided to us by local citizens, including League members. The questions are specific to the office in this case, the Wyoming State House or Senate, not towards individual candidates. So all candidates will be asked the same questions. Questions have not been provided to the candidates in advance. Each candidate will be allowed up to 90 seconds to respond to the question. The moderator will have the discretion to ask follow-up questions to cover unaddressed issues and to elicit responses that will assist voters in distinguishing one candidate from another in relation to issues. All candidates will be given time to respond to follow-up questions from the moderator. The moderator may also vary the allowed response time based on the complexity of the question and overall time constraints of the forum. The moderator may edit questions for clarity and appropriateness and may ask further questions to help expand upon an issue. In addition, the moderator may also vary the allowed response time based on the complexity of the question. At the conclusion of the forum, we will display by screen share a list of candidates and their contact information so you can contact them with follow-up questions, concerns, and requests for further information. We will also display contact information for the League, the websites for the Albany County Clerk's Office, and the Wyoming Secretary of State's office. And now I will turn things over to our moderator tonight, Mike Massey. Mike is a retired historian and administrator who served in the state legislature on the University of Wyoming Board of Trustees and is chairman of the Community Coalition for the recently built Laramie High School. He is currently a board member of the Wyoming Wildlife and Natural Resources Trust. He has also served as a moderator for other candidate forums in recent years, and the League is pleased to have him return. So welcome, Mike.
Thanks, Nancy. And welcome to all the candidates. I'm so glad that you could turn out tonight. It's certainly an odd forum, isn't it? I remember what I enjoyed most about showing up for these kind of forums or for debates was the interaction with other people, especially watching the reaction of the folks in the audience as I was trying to answer some of the questions. But it'll be a little bit different tonight, and then perhaps it might work out better for some of the candidates. This is the format and how we'll proceed. After I get done jabbering away here, I'll ask all four of you to provide an introduction. And the introduction will just simply consist of your name, the office, and your political party affiliation. And then I'll start the questions. And I'll move the questions from candidate to candidate. So the first question, I'll start with Kathy Connolly, but then the second, third, and fourth, and so on, will go to different candidates to start, so that folks who view the video later can compare the folks who are running against each other. When I pose a question to get started, the other person in that district will be the next one to go. So for instance, if I pose a question to Jean, then Carly will be the next person to go before we then jump over to District 13. So it's a little confusing, and I'll kind of lay it out a little bit more as we start to go through the night and address these questions. And finally, a reminder is if you're not answering a question, if you can keep your screen on unmute, that will make sure that the person who is answering isn't going to get any kind of background noise. And then just click on unmute when you're ready to come on. Okay, and unless there are some questions from some of the candidates here. And by the way, the candidates are Kathy Connolly, Mark Homer, Jean Garrison, and Carly Provenza. I hope I pronounce everyone's name correctly. So Kathy, would you get us started by doing an introduction in which you offer your name, office, and party?
Thanks. You would think I'd be an expert at Zoom at this point. But first, let me start by thanking first you, Mike, for being the moderator, as well as Albany County Public Library and the League of Women Voters. This is really a highlight of the campaign season. I am Kathy Connolly. I am running for re-election in House District 13, and I am a Democrat.
Mark, you'll be next.
To thank League of Women Voters and Albany County Public Library for partnering on this and everyone involved. It's a great service you do, making this information, this forum available to voters. As I said, I'm Mark Homer. I'm running for House District 13 and I am a Democrat.
Okay, Jean, or is it Jean Ann? I called you Jean for years, but I noticed you're down as Jean Ann. Which do you prefer?
It's a little bit of both, but anyway, yeah, I want to also thank the League of Women Voters and the Albany County Public Library for this service to all of us in Laramie. I am Jean Garrison. I am a Democrat running for House District 45.
And Carly.
Hi, yeah, thank you for having me as well. Laramie League of Women Voters, I've looked forward to your discussions every 2 years, I guess, but thank you again. My name is Carly Provenza. I am running for House District 45, and I am running on the Democratic Party ticket.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Here's the first question, and we'll start with Kathy, and then go to Mark, Jean, and then Carly. Wyoming is facing a financial deficit larger than any in its history. The state constitution forbids budget deficits. What revenue increases and expenditure reductions are you prepared to support?
Thank you, Mike. I mean, you started out with probably the most critical question that faces us in the legislature. It is true. We are facing an economic downturn like we have not seen in decades, honestly. We passed a budget in the last legislative session for 2 years. It began on July 1st, 2020. It goes through 2022. That budget is about $3 billion. Anticipated revenue right now is only $2.1 billion. We have a deficit. So the question is, what do we do about it? And certainly there are calls that there would be cuts. But I believe that we have already cut state government as much as we possibly can in so many important areas. And instead, we need to turn to revenue. I'm in favor of and have offered bills along the lines of a two-tiered income tax with 0% for those who earn less than $350,000, or a 1% sales tax, or a 1% increase in property taxes. All of those would change our three-legged stool from our reliance on the extractive industries to a more diversified revenue stream. I'm also in favor of bringing in money from the federal government through Medicaid expansion. That would bring in $130 million for our most vulnerable citizens. Thank you.
Okay, Mark.
Hi, regarding the revenues for the state, I would be on board with progressive taxes such as an income tax, legalizing marijuana and taxing that as well. I've heard about an I-80 toll tax, increased sin tax, especially since usage rates go up during a crisis. And with Kathy, she's had 12 years to get Medicaid expansion going as part of the legislature, and they haven't done it. But I also would be in favor of course, taking that revenue and not spending money out of the state. But I really think that the onus is on the Republican majority, and I would take a different approach. We no longer need to make ourselves, as the liberals, the scapegoats for the Republicans. Every one of them has signed the Wyoming Tax Association's no tax pledge. So we need to be a little bit quiet and let them pick up the ball here and make their move. And they can fail or they can succeed. But I will also like to see other progressive taxes in addition to the ones I've named, like a second home tax in the state. Regarding property taxes, that's a county issue or a city issue, and there's statutory limitations on how much a municipality can raise the taxes here. So that would be something we could address at the legislature as well. In terms of cuts, I don't want to see further cuts. I'm a Keynesian economics kind of guy, and I'd like to see some WPA projects coming down from the feds that we embrace and we use, just like we got Obama money during the recovery, and
Okay,
Republicans did
Mark,
go ahead and use it.
Gotta cut you off.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Jean?
Well, I would just agree that we're in a bust, and I don't see a boom coming down the pike. And so as a result, I think it's, can you all see me? Sorry.
No.
No? Okay, sorry about that. Okay, now you can. Anyway, now you can. Okay. So I just want to agree with in general with what's been said, because I think we have to have everything on the table. It's really important to recognize that I think we've cut things to the bone. I don't really see a lot of fat in the budget. We've just seen announcements from the governor. We know that agencies are facing 20% cuts, and this really hurts us tremendously. So I think we have to look at the revenue stream. I'm for using the rainy day fund to kind of bridge the gap and band-aid some things so that we have time for investments. In terms of taxes, I believe excise taxes in the area of vice taxes, certainly. I think others have mentioned that. I think the gas tax is something, sometimes we would just increase our gas tax. We actually leave federal money on the table, even because of that. So I am for Medicaid expansion. I don't like leaving federal money on the table. And I just think we need an honest discussion about a broad range of taxes in order to maintain our essential services. I'm very concerned about what happens if we don't modernize our economy and have broad revenue streams. Thank you.
Thanks. And Carly?
All right, can you hear me? Yeah, so I agree with much of everything everybody has already said. We can't cut ourselves out of a $1.5 billion budget deficit. We can't do it. We are leaving money on the table by not expanding Medicaid and ensuring that we take care of people during a pandemic. That is something that will invest in the people of Wyoming. So I don't know where we could potentially cut. Certainly these are things that we'll learn as we enter the legislature, but we really need to look at revenues, and that is in regards to taxes. We need to bring forth progressive taxes that are not going to harm working families. They're not going to harm the working poor, or they're not going to harm unemployed people who are already struggling. We need to kind of put that onus on big corporations. Previously, the legislature's talked about big box taxes. So companies that are bringing in a ton of they're making a ton of money here, but they're maybe not necessarily paying for services. It's time for folks like that to pay for the public infrastructure that we have. In addition, it would be good to also see people who are not financially struggling to also pay tax.
Thanks, Carly. Yeah, that was a difficult question to try to answer in 90 seconds. I completely understand. And I think we might have some time a little bit later on to go back and in case any of the candidates want to finish up that question or their thoughts about it. But we'll start with Carly on this question, and then we'll go to Jean, and then that'll be followed by Mark and Kathy. So here's the question for you to kick off the discussion with, Carly. And it's related to the first question that we just had. And that is, since education spending is the largest expenditure in state government, will K-12 education need to be cut?
I don't think we can cut our education system. Wyoming has an incredible education system, in part because of how our state constitution has protected education in this state. I don't think that we need to cut education. The legislature has looked at this a lot, and it just isn't a viable option. It goes back to the last question. We have to raise revenue. We have to figure something out. We can't continue to ignore that education is a costly endeavor because we live in a rural state where it's more difficult to get students to school. And quite frankly, we need to continue the one investment that we do for young people. Investing in education is an investment in a future of our state. And we unfortunately continue to see young people leave after they've completed their education here. So I think that it partly goes to show how important it is to invest in the people of Wyoming and the structures that do work. Education in Wyoming is working. We don't need to cut it. We need to preserve it. We need to protect it. We need to find creative ways. We need to build coalitions to be able to ensure that we bring that money in and we protect education.
Okay, thanks. Gene?
Well, I'm a 20-year educator here in this state of Wyoming, here at the university. I absolutely believe in our public schools. I think we must support them. They are the backbone of our rural, of our district, as a matter of fact, of our cities and our towns. And this is where the rubber meets the road for the investment in the people of Wyoming and the students of Wyoming. These are our future. I'm one of those people who came to the University of Wyoming and I had to leave in order to come back. And I'm very pleased that I was able to come back. One of my concerns is that I think we have to have really honest discussions. A $630 million deficit in just public education, it's a lot of money. And we have to bring along, in order to build a coalition, we have to bring along some like-minded supporters for education. I think it's been great that the Wyoming legislature has largely had bipartisan support for education. I'm hearing rumors about the people saying we have to look at education. And so when that happens, I think it's really important to recognize where are there areas where there might be a focus on administrative consolidation and things like that. Most of all, I want to support our students, the experience our students have in the classroom. That means supporting our teachers. And that's the core. So if it gets down to just too much money and we have to make, as a super minority, Democrats are a super minority in the House and the Senate, I just think we have to watch for that. Now, on the broad level, absolutely. I don't want to see any cuts, but I just recognize we might have to think about what that would mean.
Okay, thanks, Gene. Mark?
Sorry, I was muted. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to answer. I grew up here. I went to Wyoming schools, elementary, middle school, and high school. My two kids have gone to school here. We all went to lab school where the teachers are trained. So we love our education system and we need to keep investing in it. As I said, while the situation looks bleak, we need programs to create jobs in our state. And that's part of the economic recovery. So we need to support remote workers with programs such as Vermont has, where we give grants to lure workers here. We need maybe like Oregon has, and these are just ideas right at this point, gas pump attendants to create more jobs in that sector. As long as we have to be pumping gas, I am signing a pledge. I have signed it to support a Green New Deal, but I also am a pragmatist. And furthermore, early childhood education. Nobel Prize winning economist James Heckman has said that every dollar invested in early childhood education produces a $13 return. It creates jobs in a sector dominated by women, and it ensures that our kids are educated and achieve more academically, earn more in later life, and don't go through our social service systems as frequently. So it's a great investment, long-term, of course, but we need to invest in those kind of things right now. And I think we have the power to do it. We gotta see that the revenues are raised, but that's what we can do.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. And Kathy.
Thanks, Mike. So this was a question about whether I would support cuts in education. And let me just be kind of firmly put out there. The answer is no, absolutely not. Right? I sit right now on the School of Finance Recalibration Committee, where we're obligated to look at our school finance model every 5 years. This will be a major issue in the upcoming legislative session. It's been mentioned that there's rumors about cuts. Know that it's true, that there are legislators who believe that education should be cut. I am not one of them. Do I think that there could be some efficiencies by, for example, consolidating school districts? Sure, right? We do it right here in Albany County with a unified school district. We could procure goods and resources across school districts. But most importantly, what we need to do is support our kids, and we need to support our teachers. Those two are at the absolute center of any decision that I make. But I also think we need to modernize through that school finance recalibration, and that would include things like early childhood education. We also know that schools are different and the needs are different today than they were 15 years ago. And that includes far more in terms of social and emotional support for our kids. It means taking a good look at, for example, our school lunch program, right? Plus we need to modernize the curriculum, and that costs money. I'll fight for those things.
Hey, thank you. We'll start this next question with Mark, followed by Kathy, then Jean, and Carly. So Mark, here's the question for you. The looming budget deficit is caused in part by decreasing demand for coal and other energy resources that have long formed the foundation of the state's economy. What do you propose to do to rebuild Wyoming's economy?
First of all, as I mentioned before, I've signed a pledge to support a Green New Deal. And the reason I've done that is several factors. One, the market has spoken. Gas, oil, and coal are the fuel of the past. Secondly, scientists agree around the world that the number one issue right now threatening it's an existential crisis, is climate change. Lastly, I've been involved with fighting for environmental issues for a very long time, and my kids constantly remind me, the kids want this. So I will fight for that, and we can have a Green New Deal that generates new jobs. Hopefully that's going to come down. We're going to have a sea change in Washington. We can all hope for that. Right now, it's not assured. But I'm not going to support bills that prop up the coal and gas and mineral industry. We've got to change now. The writing is on the wall. I have mentioned some programs such as creating new jobs, attracting and giving incentives to remote workers, such as the gas pump attendant program I mentioned, and creating and enhancing the sector of teachers in the early childhood education sector as well. So we can rebuild our economy and diversify, but I would leave coal, gas, and oil out of the picture.
Okay, Kathy?
Thanks, Mike. The question was about rebuilding the economy with the recognition that our reliance on the extractive industries can no longer sustain us. So first, we've already talked about we need to diversify our revenue streams. But how do we rebuild the economy? It's by investment in people. And that's where kind of my emphasis and advocacy will go. First, to start with, laid off workers from the mines or the industries that have gone under. We need to keep them here. We need to invest in them. We need to make sure that they and their families have access to resources to keep them. So layoff aversion grants through the Department of Workforce Services, a mass layoff program. I've been advocates and sponsors of those successful bills. But a longer-term solution is investment in post-secondary education. And by that, I mean everything from a quality credential, right? A quality credential, whether it be an HVAC, for example, right? All the way up through university education. Regrettably, we have one of the lowest post-secondary education rates in the nation. But that's the way that we keep people here. That's the way we change our economy, is investing in our people. Post-secondary education is a way to do it. Thanks.
Jean.
Just hop on that and elaborate a little bit. When we look at investment in our students and in retraining people who might be displaced in their current work, I would absolutely agree. While we do very well when we look at our high school graduation rates, we're very low on the attainment side in post-secondary education. I think we need to emphasize the trades, I think that's something that we need to emphasize more. Certainly investment and opportunities in certificates and credentials at the community college level and also here at the university. I really think it's important for the education community, the higher education community, to be really versatile on that and really think about what people need. So I absolutely agree in that kind of investment. I would just say that I would focus on small businesses. When I think about the positive things in Laramie, I think about Laramie Main Street Association, which I've been affiliated with for a couple of years, the kind of small business investment. I think we make jobs one at a time. If a company hires an accountant locally, and there's 2 or 3 companies that do that, then that company can hire a new person. So I really think we need to invest in those people who are already successful and operating in our towns. And it's one job at a time. It deserves that kind of investment. I'll be interested to see what the results are of some of the COVID-19 funding and some of the innovations and the type of programs that have been implemented. Are there some things that we might take from that and ask the Wyoming Business Council to focus on? What would we retain? What has been gained? And so I think we actually have some things that we can focus on and assess and think about having some of those programs continue potentially, but we need to look at that closely. Thank you.
And Carly.
Yeah, so Wyoming state lawmakers have kind of failed to move us out of our dependency on the mineral industry, and we've seen this train coming for a long time. Unfortunately, at the state legislature, it's not enough to just bring forth good ideas of how we can diversify our economy. There's several roadblocks. We just don't have enough power as Democratic lawmakers. We need to know how to build coalitions, work across the aisle. We need to know how to form grassroots power behind those policies so that other lawmakers are invested in passing them as well. Particularly when they have a lot of public support. So it's not enough to say we're going to diversify Wyoming's economy by bringing more jobs, which I support. We should have more renewable energy. We should support new industries, like Mark Homer had mentioned, with potentially legalizing marijuana or at least decriminalizing it. And then, so we need to support jobs. We need to support workers. We can continue to support small businesses. But we also have to change Wyoming's tax structure, because all that money could come in and it ends up costing us money if we don't have a way to have those businesses pay for Wyoming's economy. So we need to bring in renewables like solar and wind. Again, investing in people with Medicaid expansion. That's also going to help our hospitals. And yeah, invest in the people of Wyoming.
Yeah, thank you. Nice segue into the next question, and we'll start with Jean on this one, and then go to Carly, and then Kathy and Mark. So Jean, here's the question for you. What do you propose to do to cover the tens of thousands of uninsured citizens who can't afford health care insurance or medical care in Wyoming?
Well, first of all, you expand Medicaid. I mean, it's the very first thing you do. Now that we've already talked about it, we're leaving federal money on the table. We're leaving thousands of Wyomingites who are the most vulnerable not having any access to affordable health care. And we are also making it more expensive for everybody else, because we have an obligation to serve people. And so when they go to emergency rooms, that leads to higher premiums and higher expenses for everybody else involved. So Medicaid expansion it's a no-brainer. It's absolutely important. I think one of the things I would highlight that mental support for mental health services is just as important as support for our physical health. I think it's super important that we do that. And I think that what I'm proposing here would be a series of things where we need to certainly maintain funding and we need to invest in it some more. I think the COVID-19 context has illustrated where we're most vulnerable. And when I think about just some of the stresses, PTSD, some of the challenges our youth have had when they haven't had access maybe to counselors. So we need to be creative, but we need to protect these things. How do we pay for it? We make sure that we use the funds we have. And we recognize that we need to continue that particular investment. Again, we might be bridging funds, but we need to find revenue to support those.
Okay. Carly.
Yeah, I agree with everything that Jean has said. We have to expand Medicaid. We've been talking about this for a long time. It was kind of shocking to not see it come up after during the special session successfully, because we had 20,000 people without health care. We know that expanding Medicaid, a lot of folks might say that it's going to cost us more money, but in reality, we see that states that have expanded Medicaid are seeing a 4 to 5% reduction in state spending on Medicaid. Again, it costs a lot of money for these rural hospitals that don't have a lot of money coming in to be able to say that they have to cover folks, because they do. If you go to the emergency room, you have to be covered, or you have to receive care. But that puts the hospitals in a predicament, and we're seeing that they're struggling. Hospitals also provide a great service to communities. They're sometimes some of the biggest employers. So expanding Medicaid also goes back to the same discussion that we just keep having, is how do we provide good jobs? How do we take care of the people of Wyoming? And how do we ensure that we all have access to health care? So it is critical that we expand Medicaid and we pay for it, and we'll see the savings. They're gonna come.
Mike, I think you're muted. Do you want me to start?
Yeah, Kathy, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I honestly think that this is an issue that we all on this panel agree with. Medicaid expansion is an absolute necessity. The alternative is we take $135 million out of the LISRA when we have so many other things to do when that federal money is there. I am proud, honestly, that I have brought up this issue for several years and have taken a beating over it and have not backed down, because this is the right thing to do for 18,000 people in this state who don't have coverage. That is crucial. Think about that. Those are our friends and our neighbors who have no coverage. Also, the additional money that would come in, that $135 million, would help take care of our rural hospitals and help us expand medical care in ways that we haven't been able to do because of the budget shortfalls. We absolutely need to expand mental health services as well as rehabilitation. We can be creative. We can set up more outpatient facilities. We can allow for innovative ways for people to have access to healthcare via telehealth that we haven't done yet. All of those are possibilities, and I look forward to working on them.
Okay, and Mark.
I've been talking to voters in House District 13. There's one woman I met, and she cares for her disabled husband and her elderly mother. That's her full-time gig. And yet she cannot get Medicaid. I met a young woman just the other day, a 30-something. Millennials are getting slammed. They're barely recovering from the last recession, some of them. And this woman had just lost her job. A local business closed. 22 people lost their jobs. And yet she can't get Medicaid. My family faced the same experience in the past. I met another couple. They get a little bit of a raise and they're ineligible. So in the past, I advocated for raising the eligibility limit, meaning that adult parents can get their kids, more people can get their kids insured. Like say Iowa has 300% of the poverty level. We need to do that as well. So it's not as simplistic as it's been laid out. And advocating, I admire my opponent advocating for this issue for years, but nothing has been done. And as Carly Provenza said, we need people who are skilled in building advocacy networks and reaching out across the state to build pressure and working through the media to put pressure on the supermajority to get this done. God bless the people of Wyoming. We need to help them. Everybody needs healthcare. It's a human right.
Okay, thanks, folks. Here's the next question, and we'll start with Kathy, then go to Mark, Jean, and then Carly. So Kathy, here's the question for you. Due to the large budget deficit, the state legislature may no longer be able to fund municipal and county governments at the current level. Do you support legislation that would expand the local government's abilities to raise taxes? And if so, which ones?
Thank you, Mike. In fact, we just passed a bill last session that allows municipalities to raise a penny of additional taxes, and I supported that. Admittedly, it took me several years to get to that position. I felt that those of us in Albany County, that we would tax ourselves, and we are one of the poorest counties in the state, but we're a generous county. I was a bit concerned that it would be inequitable, that other counties would not tax themselves, but we would need to in order to pay for essential services, right? To make sure that our sewage lines are working, for example. I have, with evidence, right, and lots of conversations with folks in the community, changed my position to one that, yes, let's let localities tax themselves. Let them make those kinds of choices. Another example is a local real estate transfer tax. That's a possibility as well. So let the voters decide within each of the communities, but I'll watch out for Albany County to make sure that our most vulnerable are not being taxed more. Thanks.
Mark.
Yeah, I work on the, I'm a member of the city's planning commission, and I have my ear to the ground, and I've spoken to the city managers and others about this issue. And the state statute ties their hands. They cannot raise property taxes, for example. I'm not quite sure I'm on board with that yet. And I think if it were done, there needs to be a cap put on it. The tax actually, it has to be progressive. So saying that here in Albany County, where a lot of people are building second or third home, we're getting COVID/climate refugees. They want a second home in our beautiful community that they don't live in most of the time, and we need to tax those houses at a higher rate. So we can look at ways to both help the poorer people with affordable housing, something I've voted for every time I've had the opportunity when there's a development that looks like it's going to be affordable housing or attainable housing, as they say. So we need to develop projects like that. And the legislature should explore these kind of issues, but I want progressive taxes. I don't want something that's going to be regressive and drive people living in trailer parks and renting apartments driven further into poverty and despair.
Okay. And Jean.
I'm really proud of the people of Albany County. I think we're very generous. Our civic organizations provide essential services because we don't have a tax base and we don't really have a structure in this state to really support many of the services that we need for people. And I just want to say that we do a lot. And so we do a lot through our own generosity. And that's that point about people helping people. I think that's a super quality to Laramie. I think it's a quality that we have in our state as well. Absolutely. I think when we see people who talk local control, but then don't allow for local control on something like tax authority, frankly, it's ridiculous. Maybe that's a little bit too strong, but it's essential that these decisions, in order to fund things that are essential to people here, that our municipality have that ability to bring options to our taxpayers and to our voting public. I think when we changed the way we do sales tax, we took tax off of food. We had the promise from the state that they would make up that gap. And I think we know that those payments are coming to an end. And we already saw the fight between smaller cities and Laramie losing out, essentially. So I really think that this is an important issue. It's supported by quite a few people. And I think it's important for us to be able to have the wherewithal to do some things and some infrastructure things that we absolutely must do.
Thank you. And Carly.
Yeah, we we need to have some more local control in terms of raising revenues for ourselves. Albany County is one of the poorest counties in the state. We are, you know, Laramie has lost a lot of money due to COVID and people not being able to spend as much money here. Because we fortunately did benefit initially from being able to supplement our budget with tax, but we need more. I don't know exactly what all of the answers are, but when I say I support a progressive tax, I support that locally as well as statewide. And what that means is that we need taxes that aren't going to be like one idea that is a regressive tax is taxing on food. Poor people spend a much larger proportion of their budget on groceries, and that doesn't make sense for us. So we need to find ways at the state level to kind of help these smaller areas, particularly when they don't look like Teton County or Jackson, where they have more money coming in, disposable incomes. We need to be able to make sure that we can take care of the people here in our community, and that we can fund to do that. So I can't tell you specifically what taxes. I would need to know more. Sometimes I don't know everything.
Thanks, everybody. Here's the next question, and we'll start off with Carly, and then go to Jean, then Mark, and Kathy. So Carly, here's your question. Do you think purchasing the Occidental surface lands and mineral rights is a sound investment during this time of large deficits? Please explain why or why not.
No, I don't think it's a wise investment. I think it's another way that we are tied to the mineral industry. We're tied to extracting our revenues out of land. We just need to think a little bit more creatively. Spending potentially, anywhere between $750 million to another $1 billion on investing in this land that, quite frankly, I don't think there's been a ton of transparency, is beneficial for the people of Wyoming. We can think more outside of the box, and I think we've got to start looking for more consistent revenue streams. If we continue to look for revenue streams that are dependent on this land purchase, I just don't see how it's gonna benefit. Now, that being said, I don't know a lot because it's not the most transparent thing that's come forth, but I think we just need to find more consistent revenue streams rather than something like the land purchase.
Okay, Jean.
Well, I voiced my concerns on this through social media and a letter to the editor, which isn't published yet. I think it might be a foregone conclusion, but regardless, I'll just say what my four main concerns are. I think the purchase of this land takes funds managed by the state treasurer's office, funds that are maybe not doing great, but they are performing, and it's putting into a big what if. And I would agree that we're talking about investing in something that is primarily has a financial benefit potentially from mineral extraction. So it is a continuation of reliance on the extractive industries as a source of revenue. When I think about, Wyoming produces 40% of the country's coal. We produce a lot of energy. We only use 4% of what we produce. 96% of it is exported. And we need to recognize that our markets, California, Colorado, Oregon, and Washington, they want renewable energy. So I'm very worried that this is something that has a benefit. Now, I think that it's a situation where I've been very concerned that there hasn't been overt or really obvious legislative involvement. I imagine there's been quite a bit of consultation behind the scenes. And so I just have to say, I have voiced my concerns. I think it might be a foregone conclusion. And as such, it's a lot of money to put into a land deal. And just hoping that the former treasurer, who is our governor, has looked at this carefully.
Okay. Mark.
There's an old joke, do you want to buy some swampland in Florida? I'm not sure of the value of this land, and there's been very little transparency about it. A person told me the other day it's largely trona, mining trona. Trona is a material that's used in the production of glass. But I don't know enough about this project. And certainly cobbling together this land, I guess a lot of it came from the UP, to put it into the public domain, to lease it to corporations for them to use and produce is not the way I think we should be using our public lands. Public lands should be in the hand of the people like myself and many I know. I enjoy cross-country skiing, mountain biking, and fishing, going out in the wildlife. That's our heritage, and tourism is a much better bet. COVID will eventually go away. We should all be practicing social distancing and wearing proper PPE. It is eventually we're going to have, we're going to come out of this, and we need to invest in the things that bring people to the state and allow them to enjoy what we all enjoy here, our natural heritage, the great outdoors. So these speculative deals, this kind of land deal at this time, I think it's not a real good idea. And of course, they've already given $2.5 million to Barclay. Come on, guys, let's get real. Let's bring in Medicaid, accept that money, and let's raise some revenues in some sensible ways that other states are doing.
Okay, and Kathy.
Thanks. I think all of the concerns that have been raised by others are absolutely legitimate. Right? They just are. But as we go forward, and again, it has not been a legislative issue, not sure that it will be. I mean, it is a statewide issue. But first to understand that these are not public lands. This is land that is owned right now by Occidental Petroleum. Before that, it was owned by Anadarko, right? These are not public lands. If this deal goes through, they will be public lands, right? So that is something that we should consider. Honestly, I think the answer for me depends on the price and the return on investment. Years ago, I was in favor of Amendment A, which was a ballot initiative that basically allowed for the Treasurer's Office to do different kinds of investment of our portfolio because we were not getting the return on investment that we should, and we rely incredibly on investment income for a revenue stream. This isn't that, but it is an alternative that is outside of the box in order to increase revenue from our existing investments. So I'm willing to take a look. All right, I want to see the price. I'd like to see the return on investment. I understand that we would then have control over some of the land. We would have control over the checkerboard in that gorgeous area of the Red Desert and actually in northern part of Albany County. Thanks.
Okay, thanks everyone. Here's the next question, and we'll start with Mark, and then we'll go to Kathy, and then Carly and Jean. Mark, here's your question. UW is a critically important part of Wyoming, especially in our community. How is UW doing? As a state legislator from Albany County, what would you do to support the university or address any problems?
We've seen two recent rounds of cuts at UW, and UW is going to be hurting from this. We need to have no further cuts, and we need to increasingly have a better climate in our community, a welcoming environment. Hopefully things are going to change, not just statewide, but at the national level, and we need to attract more international students to continue to increase our enrollment. We need to continue to recruit kids to apply for the Hathaway Scholarship because I believe an investment in secondary education is critical. So UW needs our support right now, and we need to hopefully the way the new president of UW has structured it, he's sort of sharing the blame. As I see, he's having committees of students and faculty and administrators work together to determine where cuts are, which is a pretty clever if you're the boss at the top of the ladder. But it is good to share the responsibility. So I hope that we're retaining good teachers, and we will try to make a research environment that supports the professors who are largely doing research and getting grants to bring to UW. And I have confidence, at least, that I think the current president, the new one, came from Illinois and managed a big research institution. So hopefully we can increase revenue by seeking out grants and also ensuring that we maintain good faculty there.
Okay, Kathy?
Thanks, Mike. I've been a UW professor since 1992. I love UW, right? It is my home, right? Both in terms of where I live as well as the support of my family. It's also the crown jewel of the post-secondary education system in Wyoming. Every kid has an opportunity in Wyoming to attend UW, and that's something that we need to be really proud of. In addition, it's the center of our local economy, and we need to keep that in mind as well. What happens to UW happens to Laramie and to Albany County. So we absolutely have to continue and maintain support for UW. We have a new president, all right? I think that we all kind of sit back and we give him support. But that being said, we do it and by paying attention. Right? There's been serious issues with governance at UW, and we all recognize that. Right, through the UW trustees, right, through some initiatives that have happened or not happened, the lack of transparency, a negative morale study that has been done. We need to switch that, and we need to switch it 180 degrees. But we also, in the legislature, need to make sure that funding for UW continues and that we continue down a right path that allows for the education of all of our students from the state who come to UW, as well as from elsewhere, both nationally and internationally. Thank you.
Carly?
Yeah, the university plays a critical role in Albany County and across the state. It is just tremendously important. I've been fortunate enough to earn my PhD, completing my dissertation this summer, but at the University of Wyoming, there are incredible faculty there, incredible researchers, Nobel Prize winners. We need to protect that. We do that by ensuring that we create an environment for people who are coming to the university, that they want to be here. Because we do have a great structure so that students here in Wyoming can go to school for relatively cheap or even for free. I think that is something that we should work to protect and expand. But we should also support a state that folks want to come from out of state and live in, and that is going to benefit the University of Wyoming. If we can bring forth the things that we've just been hammering on tonight with our economy and our social issues, then we can bring students from across the world and across the country who are strong graduate students, who are strong undergraduate students, who can hopefully stay here and help us in investing in the state of Wyoming and the people here. So I think in taking care of the university and is also taking care of this community, and that's my number one concern.
And Jean?
It won't surprise people that I absolutely believe in the land grant mission of the University of Wyoming. That is a responsibility to be of service to the state as a whole. I think we're lucky here in Laramie that this institution is located here. So the services that are available to people from across the state, they're just down the street. And these are everything from our technology business centers to just access to the level of expertise. You can pick up the phone. Now, anybody in the state can do that, but we can really literally walk down, walk a couple of blocks and find that. That is an essential thing. I have been involved for the last 3 years in community engagement, community affairs, and specifically this is about, here in Laramie, it's about town gown and how we work together. That's a very important thing. How do we work with our local communities? How do we listen to what people need and respond? I think that is something that people, faculty, and others on this campus do believe in. I certainly do. Let me just say, the investment the state has put into the university and into our students, such that upwards of 55% of our state residents come out of here with no debt. That is the single most important thing, I think, for somebody getting a good start. I think that that's something that it's fantastic. So we should acknowledge what we do well. we should have discussions about what we don't do well and improve them. And I am in my third round of budget cuts as an administrator here at the University of Wyoming, and these are tough. We've already taken cuts. I've been looking at budgets. We've been having to do scenarios just like other state agencies. It's tough.
Okay, thank you. Here's the next question, and we'll start with Jean, and then we'll go to Carly, and then Mark and Kathy. Jean, here's your question. What should the state's role be with regard to promoting quality early childhood education and childcare?
Okay. I think you can hear me.
Yeah.
Well, this is one of those areas where there's so many studies to support that if we can support early childhood education, we can really help people have a very good start. It's essential. I find myself just being caught between what I think we absolutely need to do and just my concern about our ability to do it. So my question is, how do we do it? How do we make sure that we bring along people who might not want to invest in early childhood education? How do we bring others to it? I think it is by focusing on what we have in common. Boy, we all want what's best for our families. We want a good start for our kids. We want good schools. And I want to meet people where they are and where the commonalities are. This is where I think Wyoming maybe has, well, where our community-based or small state, we have an opportunity to do that. So I would approach it as a way of focusing on it being absolutely something that we can probably agree on, and then it's a question of how we do it. So I don't want to see divisive politics on this. What I want to see is an ability to get done what we can get done and use it a ratchet effect. This makes progress. I don't know. To me, it's a no-brainer that we need to be investing in this.
Okay, Carly?
We know that early childhood education is a huge investment. It does things like reduces crime or our likelihood to end up in prison. There's a lot of research in terms of the education to prison pipeline. Preschool is a big deal. It helps people get a great start at a critical time in their life. It also helps working families and working class families. Childcare is very expensive. I'm fortunate enough right now financially to not have a child because I couldn't afford it, and I don't think a lot of people can. When you have to pay to have children in childcare, that's a heavy cost that this type of education would provide. So preschool, I think, is critical in investing in the people that we keep talking about. How do we diversify Wyoming's economy and tax structure? How do we take care of this state? How do we afford all these great ideas that we have? We have to invest, and we have to find ways to pay for it. And I think childhood education is one of them. We need to make sure that we take care of the families that have young children at home, while also giving people a head start.
Okay, Mark?
I'd like to say that in working for the better half of a decade as Wyoming's Kids Count Director, a position funded by the Annie E. Casey Foundation, I help popularize this issue in the state. And that's going to be my approach with a lot of issues. Inserting these stories into communities so people understand them, networking, activating people who are active in promoting these issues statewide so that we put pressure on lawmakers who wouldn't ordinarily consider voting for these things, and then using the media to amplify that message. And then another part of my approach that will differ from the current representative is that I will make Republican arguments to Republicans. And that's why I brought up the economics of this, which is investing for every dollar, you get a $13 return on investment. You get less crime, you get more educated populace who earn more. And those are the arguments we need to make if we want to have any success. And we also need to focus on high quality pre-K education. We can't continue just to have mom and pop shops where kids are not getting the critical academic skills they need. Of course, those people are heroes right now, and we do need family care and kindred care as well, because many people can't afford it. So this has to be affordable. Otherwise, it's just a pipe dream.
Okay, Kathy?
Thank you, Mike. I'm honored that several years ago that I was recognized by the statewide early childhood advocacy group for my kind of legislative leadership when it comes to early childhood education. I worked across the aisle and was responsible for a $750,000 budget footnote that allowed for community partnerships for early childhood education. That was a compromise, because what I really wanted was full opportunities for 4-year-olds to go to preschool, and know that I will continue to advocate for 4-year-olds being able to go to preschool. We'll probably start with it being voluntary, right? That's a Wyoming way. We'll make it voluntary, even though the evidence indicates that full, high-quality preschool for 4-year-olds pays off, not only in terms of the prison pipeline, but also in terms of costs for special education while kids are still in school. So it's an incredibly good investment for our children and their families, as well as our communities, and I will continue to advocate for it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Next question, we'll start off with Kathy and then go to Mark, then Jean and Carly. And by the way, just kind of a comment, I have found out one of the challenges of going to Zoom as opposed to being live here in the library. Usually by this time of the forum, I have a fistful of questions from the audience, and the biggest problem is deciding which ones am I going to ask in the remaining time, and that's not a problem right now. And so I'm coming up with a couple of questions off the top of my head, so I hope that they make sense. And so this one is for you, Kathy, and again, we'll go to Mark, Jean, and Carly. When the state has reduced its budgets previously, it seems that the Wyoming Department of Health has taken a disproportionate percentage of the cuts, primarily because it has such a big budget. What are your priorities within the Department of Health that you would defend with your dying breath from being cut? I think you're on mute, Kathy.
Oops, sorry. I'll be honest with you. Within the Department of Health, I think I would defend with my dying breath virtually every program that they have. The Department of Health is responsible for the distribution of services throughout the state and for, again, our most vulnerable populations, for our disabled community, for our development, our young children that are getting services through our CDC centers. They're responsible for access to medical care. They're responsible in part for funding that goes to our hospitals and our regional health centers. They're responsible for our prevention. They're responsible for example, for suicide prevention. They're responsible for our mental health. And in fact, our mental health services. I would make the argument that in fact, we should be looking at ways to bolster them. And in part because there are opportunities to partner across state agencies with, for example, the Department of Family Services, with the Department of Workforce Services. Right, there's opportunities for partnership, as well as there are additional opportunities for federal money that we are not taking advantage of because of the requirement that there is some matching funds from us. But when we get $3 for every one, it's worth it.
Thank you. Mark?
Cutting healthcare, the Department of Health during a pandemic is just nonsensical. I toned down my rhetoric there a little from what I'd really like to say. And we've seen a lack of transparency in many state agencies, and we've seen the legislature refuse to fund the YRBSS survey, for example, that gives us more information about risk behaviors among kids. We need to make that stuff transparent, not just in that arena, but like in juvenile justice as well, where they don't collect data well enough. And I wouldn't cut any of it, like Kathy said. We need to protect it, and we need to work on prevention measures. We need to adopt better telemedicine delivery services. We need to make it so people who are on Medicaid or Medicare don't have to travel so many miles out of their community. I don't know if it's still the case, but up in the Teton County, people from 80 miles away are driving in there to get prenatal services. It's just not something we're going to cut. So in a pandemic, I wish the governor would take more strict measures and implement, make sure everybody wears PPE. My God, you're walking around out there without your mask on, endangering other people's lives. It's just unconscionable. So let's take prevention measures, let's show some transparency, and let's protect our healthcare department.
Okay, thank you. Jean?
I would have a very hard time finding a way to cut the Department of Health. As a matter of fact, we should be lauding the perspective that has been the people who have been sitting at the front lines in providing scientific information and data about what's going on and trying to give reliable information to the citizens of Wyoming. And at the same time, they've been doing budget scenarios too. So there are people running scared within the Department of Health as well as in other agencies. And I think this is an essential place. I think we have a lot of services that we have underfunded. I think mental health is one example. I think it's tremendously important for things like, I believe in, sure, telehealth and the things that have been mentioned before is super important and really useful when we have such long distances between communities. But after all, if we didn't have a partnership with the Kiwanis and the Ivinson Hospital in the emergency room, we might not have a suicide line here in the state of Wyoming. So there are things I'd invest in versus see cut. And I would agree, during a pandemic, it's very difficult to have this conversation and realize that we're in a much more vulnerable place than we were before. And we need to look at that before we make have any discussions of cuts, because what we're really looking at is probably a need for investment.
Okay, thank you. Carly?
Yeah, mental health is something that's been cut in recent years that has been detrimental. Wyoming is in the top 2 states every year for the highest suicide rate. We just don't spend enough money or time considering suicide and mental health and substance abuse issues in this state. Cutting any money from the Department of Health is just, we're going to see detrimental impacts across the board. Yeah, we need to make sure that we're investing in this given the pandemic. Going back to what Mark has mentioned, are we going to shoot ourselves in the foot and make sure that we don't have anything when the pandemic is likely going to spike again? We're only on the first curve. It doesn't make any sense to cut any of the money from the Department of Health. We have to take care of all of these things. I certainly have been someone who didn't have health care, and I have put a burden on a hospital because I couldn't pay the $50,000 when my appendix was removed. Department of Health and taking care of our hospitals, that stuff's very important.
Okay, thank you. The next question, we'll start with Carly and then go to Jean and then Mark and Kathy. And for this question, we'll circle back to the very first one that we asked. And that is the state is facing a budget deficit over the next biennium of somewhere between $1 and $1.5 billion. It may even be higher than that. So far during our forum, we've talked about education and healthcare now. And those are by far the 2 biggest budgets in state government, along with Department of Corrections. So where in the budget would you accept reductions? what should be the state's priority when it comes to reducing the budget, unless, of course, you're proposing that the state raise revenue that would cover the budget deficit.
I think I've hammered enough on how much revenue we need to cut, so I'll give you a different tune. If there are things that need to be cut, which I don't think there are, that our criminal justice system is spending a lot of money to put people in prison. It costs anywhere between $40,000 and $60,000 per person per year to have someone in prison. And we have a large proportion of people in our prison system who are there for things that a lot of people in Wyoming might not agree that they should be in prison for. And we're spending a lot of money on a punitive system that doesn't help rehabilitate. It doesn't necessarily make our communities safer. We have a problem with locking people up and throwing away the key and expecting that to solve the initial issue, which has nothing to do with criminal justice. So we could save a lot of money by not putting people in prison for marijuana, for one. And we could also save a lot of money if we expand our services for mental health, instead of having people who need mental health care getting stuck in our jail system and our prison system, particularly when we're seeing that that's also not an effective way to help folks and to ensure that they don't end up in the same place. So we need, if we're going to cut something, we need to figure out how to cut some of the spending that we are taking to the legislature to use an ineffective punitive system.
Okay, thank you. Jean?
I think we've been asked this question a number of ways, so I want to take a little bit different tack too. I think that one of the things that's happened in the state of Wyoming historically is that we have not had honest discussions about issues. As a matter of fact, the first time I saw a really public, honest discussion about that coal, oil, and gas were going away was the 2019 Governor's Business Forum. And I was struck then that there seemed to be agreement, that there was recognition that change had to come. So, having said that, what do you do? Well, I think as a state, and I would say this as a nation, we need to have a very broad discussion about what our values are, what we think is essential, what we can pay for given our context of the fiscal cliff we're facing, and if we need additional revenues, what are those and what is acceptable to people? I really want to see us have those conversations. I want to see us empower the public to have a voice in that. I think that's super important because, after all, who's going to bear the burden of either the cuts or the increasing need for revenue? Yes, we have an opportunity for, I agree on corporations that set up shop. We're the Cayman Islands of the United States. In many ways, I agree with most everything we've all said tonight. But that's what I'd say, an honest conversation to know what we want to do and can do.
Okay. Thanks. Mark?
Hi, like Carly, the area of juvenile justice and justice reform in general is somewhere where we can save a lot of money. And I want to bring up the model I developed in working in advocacy, both when I was working at Wyoming Survey Analysis Center, and I did tobacco prevention and control evaluation. And I made a film, Lighting Up Debate, in addition to launching some surveys to document that. And that was shown on Wyoming PBS. And put pressure across the state so we can change these things. With the movie I made, Your Neighbor's Child, in 2010, people are just waking up to this stuff with the Black Lives Matter movement, thank God. But in making that movie, we encountered systemic racism and institutionalized racism, police brutality, over-policing, for-profit prisons, kids being locked up from all walks of life, especially lower class, for minor offenses, and running a gamut of abuses. Now, at the time, we saw the Casper facility get shut down, the old one, but unfortunately they took Obama money, and Tea Party members, in fact, took it and built more juvenile jails in the state, whereas in Casper you have 22 beds when the Casey Foundation estimated you just need 2. And those restorative justice programs that you give to kids produce long-term better results for society and lower costs. So let's work together to build the advocacy networks and support we need to pressure our politicians statewide to change. And thanks, I went over a little.
Okay, Kathy?
Thank you, Mike. Let me give you some very specific suggestions about what can happen with criminal justice reform and what it can save us. We can get rid of the death penalty, number one. We have a death penalty that's still on the books that hasn't been used in decades, but we need to maintain what's called a death qualified public defender's office. Again, it costs us millions of dollars each year. We don't have the death penalty. We do not need a death penalty qualified public defender's office. Another thing that we can do is take a look at our minimum sentences that we have for felonies. The reason in part that we are sending so many people to jail is that we have mandatory minimum sentences. Let's take a look at them and get rid of them. We don't need them. They tie the hands of judges. When we do that, what we need to do is increase intensive supervised probation. So we have people, instead of going to prison because they have violated parole, which is another reason that our prison population is so great, that we have an alternative that keeps individuals in their families and keeps them in their communities. Those are three very specific ways that we can save money through the Department of Corrections. In addition, I would take a good look at capital construction right now in the state. We can slow it down. Do we really need a new office building in Casper right now? Probably not. We could slow it down. Other things that we can do, another one I mentioned was we could look at consolidating school districts. Time's up.
Yep. Thank you. And I think we have time for one more question. This year, 2020, is the 100th anniversary of the passage of the 19th Amendment, giving women the right to vote. And of course, Wyoming Territory was one of the very first places in the country where women were granted the right to vote. And as a result, we gained the name the Equality State. Do you believe that we're living up to that term of the Equality State? And if not, what is it that we need to do in order to become more equal? And Mark, we'll start with you on that one and then go to Kathy and then Carly and Jean.
Thank you. Firstly, I'd like to thank Representative Connolly for the work she's done on this issue and raising awareness. And I believe passing a bill that recognizes women in Wyoming for their achievements. Having said that, it's sad that we're still debating the same issues they were in the late 1800s in Wyoming. And I think that it's all politics are local. We go down to Colorado, we have a lot of women representing people in public positions. Even in the deep South where we have so much racism, we have women executives and governors. Unfortunately, Wyoming is still behind. I myself consider myself a feminist. And when we look at gender issues, nowadays, we don't want to be locked into how we're perceived either as a man or a woman, depending on what our roles should be. My wife and I have co-parented over the years, supporting each other's careers. And some of the greatest joy I had was when my son was a newborn, after my wife and I spent a summer together caring for our son at that age. She had to go back to work and I stopped teaching and went and became the full-time caregiver. A great joy. So we need to expand the roles that we have, and men need to be able to be caring and empathetic too, and have those wonderful qualities.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Kathy?
Thanks, Mike. I am incredibly proud of Wyoming's history, of Wyoming being known as the Equality State, as being the first state in the nation where women had the right to vote, with some problematic history that goes along with that as well. And I want to own that history as well, that Native women could not vote. Right? We need to recognize that as well, and we need to recognize that I don't think that we are living up to that motto, and that it's not something that should just be a static moniker that every school kid can say that we're the equality state because of suffrage. Instead, we have to look at where we are now. And there are two areas in particular, actually three, where we're not living up to that motto at all. One is in terms of the wage gap between Wyoming's men and women. We are at the bottom of the barrel, right? We are regularly in the bottom 2 or 3 in the nation. We need to do far more work in terms of recognizing it and addressing it. And I will continue to bring bills for that recognition and to change it, like I did in the last session regarding equal pay. The second area is in terms of political representation. We have the worst in the nation right now in terms of our legislature, right? That's something that we need to change by electing more women. I don't even get to my third. Oh, well.
You might get a chance here in a second, Kat.
Okay.
Thanks. Carly?
Yeah, while there are many things to be proud of here, there's a lot of things that we really need to work on. The women's wage gap in this state is terrible. We need to do better for women. And that means that we need to advocate for women workers. We need to ensure that they're making more money. We see that most of our minimum wage jobs are held by women and even single mothers. So we're not taking care of women when we are ensuring that they're taken care of as workers. We're not taking care of women when we're talking about childcare. The legislature, as Kathy mentioned, it's 85% male at this point. Fortunately, House District 45 will have a female in it, so that's good news. But there's other bad news for also women of color and just people of color in general in this state. We don't do enough, and we don't take care enough of our Native populations here. We don't do enough for Black and brown lives in this state when it comes to police reforms. We don't protect our LGBTQIA brothers and sisters. There is so many things that we need to continue to work on that we haven't caught up with other states on. And so we have got to make that a priority if we want to continue this name. If it's not going to be a priority, we should come up with some other slogan, I guess, because right now we're not advocating enough.
Okay, and thank you. Jean?
So I've been involved in the Governor's Council for Wyoming Women's Suffrage as a liaison between University of Wyoming. So I've seen a lot of the programming that's come out of the last couple of years. And I would say absolutely equality is an aspirational aspect for Wyoming. I would agree we need to own our history. I want to own the good things and I want to own the tough things. And I think that this last couple of years has really brought to light discussions that need to happen, changes that need to occur. I concur with Kathy and I think everybody else on the gender wage gap. Absolutely needs to be addressed. I think about women who in the pandemic and those who've been working in service industries and places where in jobs where they don't have health care, just how vulnerable people really are. And we've seen that over the last 3 months. And that really affects women and families in general. And I just want to say that it is about equality, equity, inclusion of everybody. I would agree that it's not just about women. And I want to just tout exactly what Carly said. I am absolutely proud that House District 45 has an all-women slate and that there will be a woman and that will increase by 1 unless there's losses. That's tremendous. And you know, that is a very interesting race because it takes certain issues out of the mix and it allows us to actually have real conversations about issues that affect women and families. And we all know you empower women, you empower families, you empower people.
Okay, thanks, Jean. I think we have enough time for everybody to have 60 seconds to convey any last thoughts that you might have, either some answers from previous questions or anything else that might be on your mind. So we'll start with Jean and go to Carly, Kathy, and then Mark. 60 seconds each. So go ahead, Jean.
Okay, well, I want to make a comment that has nothing to do about revenue and how it has anything to do about taxes or just the need to diversify the economy. Maybe I should say, I think that is the #1 thing we face. It affects everything that we've talked about. But let's talk about what I think we can do in the state of Wyoming. And something that makes Wyoming special. I believe that the work I've been able to do at the university and around the state, in my hometown and here in Laramie, has been about building community. And when you build community, you build opportunity for people. I think we have an opportunity to work together. And I'm done.
Okay. Thanks, Jean. Carly?
Yeah, thank you all for all the great ideas that have come forth tonight. I do want to say that I know how to build community here. As the executive director of ACOP, I've spent a lot of time with folks in this community and listened to them about what they need. And we just got to keep our ears to the ground in terms of that. I'm able to work across the aisle. I'm able to talk to folks from all walks of life because I've lived many different types of life, I guess. I'm a criminal justice expert. I come from a working class family. I've been without health care. I know the working struggles of people in Wyoming. And I've been able to successfully advocate for police reforms in this community, touting a 60 to 70% support from Republicans in this town. So I have built long-lasting relationships, and I'm going to continue that hard work. And I hope I get to continue it as your state legislator. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks, Carly. Kathy?
Thanks, Mike. And thank you all. I've been honored by the folks in House District 13 to be your legislator for the past 11 years. I have been honored to be elected by my Democratic peers to be the minority floor leader in the House of Representatives. I am honored that they consider me an experienced, effective leader who works across the aisle and works with the executive branch to get things done. As we go on over the next couple of months, my priorities first will be to address COVID-19, to make sure that we stay healthy and safe. And second, that we invest in people. With our downturn in the economy, our #1 investment is with our friends, our families, our neighbors, our community. We invest in people and we'll succeed. Thank you.
Thanks, Kathy. And Mark?
Yeah, hi. You know, this race is not about any of us. Oh, hang on. My video stopped, Mike. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can we start this over? Jamie, you ready? Okay. This race is not about any of us. We're in a major crisis right now, and we have to vote for the candidates who are going to be most effective in making a change for Albany County. I chose very deliberately the tree and the rock as my logo, my symbol, because it represents the tenacity and hardworking spirit of Laramie. And I want to give a shout out to all of these groups helping to cobble together our community: Pilot Hill Project, Feeding Laramie Valley, Interfaith Community, Family Promise, ACOP, Downtown Healthcare Clinic. We need to thank these people. They're the core members of our community working hard to support us all. And I say thanks.
Okay, thanks, Mark. And thanks to our 4 candidates. You did tremendously tonight. You did wonderfully. You addressed the questions directly. Your responses were quite thoughtful. And regardless of who gets elected, you're going to make Laramie and Albany County very proud. And you also managed to get beyond the distancing effects of technology. And I think that anyone who watches this video is going to be drawn right into this forum and will be paying close attention to what you have to say. Also wanted to thank our timekeeper for yeoman work and for keeping us on time. You did an excellent job. To the Albany County Public Library for the support of these forums, and particularly to the voters and they're continuing work to provide information to the public, so that the most important thing that we do in a democratic society is to vote, and we do it in an informed way. So thanks to all the folks with the league, and I kick it back to Nancy.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. As usual, you've done a great job. I especially appreciate your ability to think on your feet there and pose a few more questions. And like I said, this is our first run, and so I know we'll need to get a larger question pool probably for the next group, although I think we have a larger number of candidates too, and then it takes longer to run through the questions. I also do want to also say thank you to the library, as Mike did as well. They also offered their facilities for anybody who does not have internet access or reliable internet or computer usage for candidates. And that's greatly appreciated in the future forums that we may need that. I want to remind everybody who is listening to the recording here or watching it that we do have more forums coming up. We have one on July 16 for Wyoming House District 14, one on July 23 for Wyoming Senate District 10, excuse me, and House District 46, July 30th for Wyoming House District 47, and then on August 6th, that's starting at 5. Those all, well, it doesn't matter to our viewers because these are all just recorded. On August 6th, we will have the City Council and the Clerk of District Courts just providing statements. They are all uncontested races in the primary, and so we just elected to let them give a campaign statement, so to speak. Also on that August 6th date, we will conclude with the Albany County Commission candidates. And all of these will be available for viewing on YouTube, probably 2 to 3 days after the actual dates that I gave you there. So I want to remind people to watch the forums, plan on looking at our primary voters guide, there we go, that is already posted on our website. And also a reminder that there will be a general election voter guide when we come to the general election, and further forums at the general election time as well. Whether or not they'll be virtual or not, I don't know for sure. And as Mike said, we want to remind you all to please vote. That's the most important thing you can do, is vote and be an educated voter. And so as we conclude, and before we all leave the meeting, I'm going to do a screen share. And the screen share will have contact information for all our candidates that are here tonight, plus Roxy Hensley, who was not able to be here, who is running in House District 45. And so since we do not have usually at a forum when it's in person, we conclude with a conversational time between candidates and the audience members. So in lieu of that, we encourage you to do any follow-up you have after viewing this by contacting those candidates. And that we also have information about how to get in touch with the league and get in touch with the library, the Secretary of State's office, and who am I leaving out there? Albany County Clerk's office. And it will have the links there of where you can go to get on and find the link to the forums. So here we go. Can you all see that? And so for our viewers there, you can always hit pause on YouTube if you need to have more time to look at this or jot down that candidate information. And so with that, I think we conclude our first virtual forum.